Hey guys, I'm Jaden Bede and welcome back to the Legal Intern Diaries Montana Edition, episode 5. I'm super excited because in today's episode we have Brittany Williams from the Missoula County Attorney's Office. Now, Brittany has held a whole host of roles over the course of her career. Currently, she is the lead deputy county attorney of the Major Crimes Unit for Missoula County and also is a special assistant U.S. attorney, which are fantastic roles and is definitely a future mentor if any of you are looking to have one in the Missoula County Attorney's Office if you're looking to go the prosecutor route. Additionally, she is actually one of 2 intern supervisors at the Missoula County Attorney's Office, so she's going to be able to provide stellar insight not only in this podcast but also in the future if it's something that you're looking to get into for you to become an intern not only in Missoula County but also at other county attorneys' offices across the state of Montana. Again, Brittany's held a wide variety of positions throughout her career, all of which making a significant impact on each community in which she was serving. Additionally, I think it's also important to note that Brittany has made an impact in her workplace as well. She's involved in the Employee Engagement Committee as well as the County Wellness Committee, both of which are really integral in order for the culture of the County Attorney's Office to remain positive, especially when working with such intense subjects like Brittany does on a daily basis. We're so excited to have you today, and thank you for being here and all you do for Missoula County.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to people who are interested in pursuing a career in law.
Yeah, awesome. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your journey to the law?
Okay. So let's see. I came to the University of Montana in 2005. Originally wanted to pursue kind of the medical field. I graduated from the University of Montana with a degree in health and human performance, option exercise science with a minor in psychology. Nothing at all to do with the legal field. Hadn't really thought about doing anything involved in the legal field for, I don't know, maybe since I was in grade school, perhaps. And I had the intentions of going to our physical therapy program here at the University of Montana. They accept approximately 34 people out of over 400 candidates. I applied, did not get in. And so I was kind of left with, what do I do? Where are my interests? And so I met with my undergraduate advisor and he asked me if I'd ever considered going to law school. He said, I think you'd be a great lawyer. Have you ever considered going to law school? And I, like I said, hadn't thought about it in, I don't know, at least probably 15 years. And so I started to look into that. And similar to, I imagine, a lot of the folks on your podcast, I really had no idea where to start. And so I took the opportunity that my undergraduate advisor set me up with to meet with a local attorney in town. So again, a really nice connection to have based on my personal relationship with my undergraduate advisor. He set me up to meet with an attorney who I think had been practicing for somewhere between 8 and 10 years. And so the kinds of questions that I had for him, what was law school like? What was the LSAT like? Those were long gone in his past. He had no recollection of those sorts of things. And so, I started looking at our law school, looking at what it would take, average LSAT score, things that they were looking for in particular. If I recall from 10 years ago, I want to say the average LSAT score was maybe 153 or something like that. And there was some essays that we had to write for applications for law school. And I certainly did not come from a writing background, being kind of in the medical science type of field. But I studied for the LSAT for certainly not long enough. I don't even know that I took one full-length test. I took an LSAT class that was taught by maybe a law student that really freaked me out, actually, because this person was like, I took 27 full-length tests before I took the LSAT, and here I hadn't taken, one full LSAT. And so I ended up taking the LSAT. I got somewhere around the average score, got into law school, and that started my journey at the University of Montana School of Law. That's what it was called then. And yeah, again, in law school, I was able to use kind of my medical background and thought that that was kind of the type of law that I wanted to go into. And again, pivoted post graduation.
Awesome. Yeah. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but you didn't start out at the Missoula County Attorney's Office.
That's right. I had an internship in Mineral County, so an adjacent county. When I graduated law school, the climate of the legal field was a lot different than it is now. There was very few jobs really available in Missoula County. I went to Mineral County. I worked as a part-time deputy county attorney, and then I saw that Missoula County had a very rare opening. I was informed by multiple law professors that people who work in these type of government jobs stay there for a really long time, and they're very hard to get into. And so I applied here in Missoula County and was hired.
Awesome. Fantastic. And so you were originally hired as a deputy county attorney, and then how did you get into all these other roles? Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. So when I was hired in Mineral County, I handled all the justice court cases. So I had approximately 80 cases, which is pretty high for, a smaller county. As always, the interstate has run through Mineral County. And so we had a lot of traffic offenses, different things like that. And so that really helped me to get my feet wet and get some trial experience and just different courtroom experience that I hadn't had a ton of in my internship through law school. And so I got hired in Missoula County. I again started in justice court. I probably had a caseload of maybe 150 cases of misdemeanor cases. I stayed in justice court for approximately a year and a half, I think. And then I had an opportunity to kind of transition into a new position that was kind of a hybrid position in our office. It was orchestrated and facilitated by my former boss, Kirsten Papps, the former Missoula County attorney. And my position was a hybrid DN SVU caseload. So a DN is the dependent neglect unit of our office, and then SVU is the special victims unit prosecutors. And so I was looking at handling cases that overlapped in those different areas. And I did that for, I don't even know how long ago, or how long of time. And then I kind of just transitioned into just a straight SVU caseload when we realized kind of the scheduling and the overlapping nature of that made those two balancing acts very difficult. And so I transitioned into a SVU caseload. And I did that for a period of time. And our SVU unit is designed to have a lower number of cases so we can really focus on being victim-centered. And there's a lot of work that goes into those sorts of cases. And so I did that caseload for a couple years, and then I transitioned. We had a opening in the major crimes unit when another prosecutor left. And I thought that that was a good opportunity to get into that unit and see what that was like. So I've been in the major crimes unit probably for at least 6 years, maybe 7 years, something like that. All the years tend to blend together when you are in this fast-paced environment that is criminal prosecution. So I, just like anyone else in our office, you kind of start at the lower end of the ladder and you work your way up. I had opportunities to second chair some really big cases in our office. One specifically I can think of was a felony homicide, very, very difficult, had never been tried before in our office. And I feel like that really kind of gave me a good jumping point to, show my value to the office. And it was a unique opportunity. I really enjoyed volunteering to second chair on some of these bigger cases. Because I feel like that was the best way to get experience from more senior attorneys in my office and just really learn from them, which was invaluable. And so approximately a year and a half ago, I applied to be the lead of my unit, and I was selected for that position. I want to say simultaneously, or maybe it was a few months after. We in our office collaborate with the federal prosecutors for something called Project Safe Neighborhoods. And so historically we've had a SAUSA, is what it's called, a Special Assistant United States Attorney. Actually, our 2 previous SAUSAs have went on to become federal prosecutors. And so I passed the very extensive background to become a federal employee. And I don't get paid for that separately. That's just a part of my county. It's essentially what I would attribute to being an MOU with the feds. And so that's been really cool as well. I've had an opportunity to try a federal case. And yeah, so I've gotten lots of different opportunities to see all different areas, both of the state law and federal law. And yeah, I would not call myself an expert in any field, but I would definitely call myself a Jill of all trades. I also, go and dip my hand in SVU cases occasionally. I've tried an SVU case where I was the first chair 2 months ago. And so I'm in a unique position within my office where I have kind of the autonomy to try any kind of case that I want based on my experience, which is really cool. And it's a nice way to kind of balance and help out my coworkers or have them help me out as well. I'm also currently, I have the probably 95% of our drug distribution cases. And so I work exclusively with our what's called HIDTA, the high intensity drug trafficking areas, our Missoula Drug Task Force. And so, yeah, I've got my hand in a lot of different pots, let's say that.
Yeah, and I think that that's awesome because not only does that bring perspective for this podcast and is just another reason why it's so fantastic to have you on, but also, I mean, you having your role with the interns in the office with your extensive experience, that translates to them. Your years of experience can teach them a lot with, and not to mention everything that they would learn through doing and seeing from other attorneys as well. So I just think that that's so fantastic. So you mentioned that you had an internship and maybe even a few throughout your time. What do you think was most valuable that you took away from your internships that others should possibly be looking to take away from theirs? Because ultimately, as I think you would agree, it's up to you to really take what you've got in an internship and make it something, right? And so what are things that they should be looking for that you found valuable in yours?
Let's see. I would say, so I had a paid internship at a law firm here in Missoula at DeSopolis, McDonald and Lind, which I would consider one of the most prestigious law firms in Missoula. And I will say when that, summer before second year rolls around and everyone's looking for internships, I sat down with someone at the law school and they informed me, hey, these paid internships where you're doing those interviews at the law school, those are going to go to the top 25% of your class. I did not fall into the top 25% of my class. And so I just thought to myself, what am I going to do with this information? And so I took my cover letter and resume and I went what would equate to door-to-door to law firms. I wanted to get my face out. I wanted them to know who I was. I wanted to, that's something I value, is that kind of face-to-face interaction and say, I maybe am not in the top 25% of my class, but this is why you should hire me. And I just happened to stumble upon DML, and Molly Howard is one of the attorneys there. She grew up in the same area that I had currently lived at the time. And so we kind of had that instant connection. Yeah. And so there was I guess I don't know the background process of how that all looked, but I was hired. I actually still have the voicemail on my phone from however many years ago where they called to tell me that they hired me. It was that impactful and meaningful to me. And, Milt DeSopolis is really just a pillar in was a pillar. He's recently deceased in the last couple of years, but really a pillar in the legal field. And so I was more than excited to, work under his roof. And I got to work with so many great attorneys there. And so again, a big part of that as you're balancing your law school, because what's the old saying? The first year they work you to death. The second year they bore you to death. And the third year, something
they do both or something like
something
that.
to that effect. And so, your first year, oh no, they scare you to death, they work you to death, they bore you to death. I think that's how it goes. Again, 10 years out, you kind of forget those things. But so I remember just being very afraid of and just having to work to get out of my shell, to go door to door to these attorneys who didn't know me from Adam, probably don't remember my face, couldn't say what my first name was. And so it was, I put myself out there sending out emails, hey, I'm looking for work, which is also, I will say, a double-edged sword. You are either going to get 30 emails or people looking for work, or you're going to get no emails. So be mindful of your time. But I do think for people who are looking for internships, having those connective pieces. So think also outside the box. I will say, Molly and I happen to connect on, a geographical standpoint, but I would say depending on what sort of law you're looking into, you can benefit from any internship, even if it's not something you ever think you'll go into. And so, there's plenty of firms here that do civil defense, that do civil plaintiffs work. Obviously, we have internships at the county attorney's office. And so I would just say, rub as many elbows as you can in the legal community, whether that's speaking to support staff, to paralegals, to other attorneys, to, hey, my grandpa was represented in this lawsuit over his, boundary line of his property. Who was that? Would that person be willing to sit down and chat with me? Did they have any recommendations? Because there's going to be opportunities where people say, hey, we're actually looking for an intern. We haven't gone through the formal process of telling the law school or, whatever else. And so it's absolutely invaluable to have those real human connection pieces. So I would say do that the best you can. And whatever your background is, you're coming from, just have conversations with people. You never know what's going to spring out of a conversation. And again, I can't emphasize enough putting your face out there. I feel like that, I guess I can't say for sure, but someone who is willing to come into a law office and say, here's my resume and cover letter, will you meet with me? I think that was impactful. And so that would be some advice that I would have. And then just when you're in there, really put yourself out and try and get as much experience and again, those connections, because when you graduate, for example, Molly, when I went through a dissolution a couple years ago, she represented me in that. Those sorts of connections. Or I've had, different personal injury things, or family or friends have been injured, and it's like, hey, do you have a recommendation? And it's, So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that covers a lot of different topics, and I don't know if you know, but the podcast is generally an outline of my ebook that I created, and in a couple of the chapters, specifically chapters 4 and 5, for those of you listening, talk quite a bit about the things that you're referencing. And networking is just a running theme that was talked about in our last podcast with our pre-law advisor at the U. I don't think that any of us can stress enough how important it is to get yourself out there and be confident in yourself and all of those different things. Make sure you have your ducks in a row, make sure you have your knowledge base, of course, but it's definitely whatever you make of it. Like, you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't do anything with it, you're not probably going to be super successful. But if you do and you put yourself out there, like Brittany was talking about, you definitely can make an impact, not only for yourself and for your career, but on others in your community, for sure. So why don't you tell me a little bit about what it means to supervise the legal interns in your office? What does that role look like?
So, not quite as extensive as when I became a SALSA, but I had to go through almost an application process to become an intern supervisor. You have to apply, you have to essentially say why you have the experience and knowledge, and that you are going to, ethically and soundly advise these students on, and it's on a whole host of things. It's not just about the type of field they're in, but how they're going to conduct themselves, their personal identity as an attorney. It's actually quite a load to carry when you're thinking of these folks are going to be the next future attorneys that, maybe are going to be across the table from me, maybe are going to be next to me, maybe are going to be out in the communities where they're helping any number of populations. And so typically we get interns every semester, and we try to cap it at 2 interns. Just with our workload, we want to give kind of a more holistic and valuable experience to them. And so we try and cap it usually at 2 interns. And we usually recommend our interns take as many credits as they can, because the way that criminal law works, you could get pulled into a hearing on, for example, yesterday I got pulled into a parole hearing to cover for my boss on an hour's notice. So unless you're there and you have a pulse and you're in the office, you might miss out on some of those opportunities. And so, like, for example, one of our interns this year, I pulled her in on a parole hearing. They pull them in on PTR hearings, on trials, different things like that. And so we always encourage them as many hours as you can, and there will be no shortage of work. We have no shortage of work in our office, and we will help you through that process. And so the more that they're there, I had a couple interns a couple years ago who were just phenomenal. They were so great. They had superior writing abilities. Like, it's so nice to not have anything other than maybe a stylistic change to make to a response brief. And I always like to have my interns put their names on their legal writings when they get filed. So I'll have, Jane Doe, legal intern, Brittany Williams, deputy county attorney. Because when you leave and you go into the legal field, you need to have a writing sample. And I found when I left, from internships, I was like, I don't have anything that has my name on it. So I'm going into a job interview and I'm saying, I actually wrote this. It doesn't say my name on it, but I wrote it, if you believe me. And so I try and do those things for my interns. I think that's very valuable and important. I also, when I had my legal internship through the law school, I remember appearing in municipal court for an omnibus hearing and just being petrified. Despite being somewhat of a public speaker my entire life, I was just panicked. And so I really try and model those things for my interns. I'll encourage them to come down to court with me. I will encourage them to get on, for example, like an uncontested sentencing first, so that they can just get familiar with the court, how that works. I like to take my interns down and introduce them to the judges. That's one of our obligations as supervisors. And, help them to do charging documents. And also, we have the very unique opportunity, which I'm sure happens in civil practice as well, but of discussing legal issues, ethical issues, how we're going to charge a case, how we're going to, move through the whole process. I also try and, when I get the opportunity, pull my interns into meetings with victims so that they can see how I interact with the victim, what that looks like, because those are the sorts of things that you don't learn in law school. They don't teach you those things in law school. Right. And so I try and give that sort of experience because, I've said for years and years, supervising the interns, that if I was applying for jobs, I would want to be able to say that I have done 20 bench trials, I've done 2 jury trials, I've done 5 PTR hearings, I've, all of these sorts of things, rather than saying, I worked on this one brief or, whatever else. And so I like to give real hands-on experience. But I will say that is largely dependent on the intern themselves, how much they want to do that, if they're looking for those sorts of opportunities. And because there is certainly no shortage of them in the county attorney's office.
Yeah, so. Awesome. Yeah, and I think that, all of those different things I think are something that anyone looking for an internship is definitely seeking. But I think something pivotal to just a reminder on is that if you're going into private practice as an intern, there isn't teaching guidelines for you. So it's going to look very different firm to firm and I mean even attorney to attorney within a firm. But to know that, on the state side of things, that there is at least a little bit of a rubric of things that you will for sure take away, I think is really valuable to know coming into those things. That way you know at a basis you're going to get this much value. And so I think that makes it very much well worth your time to work on the state side for sure, as opposed to a private practice criminal defense attorney, unless that's what you want to do and that's the opportunity you have. And so I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I'd also say if someone is interested in doing criminal defense, I think it's very valuable also to consider an internship in the prosecutor's office, because not that we have, tricks of the trade by any means. We're certainly upholding our ethical responsibilities, but you get kind of the ins and outs. You get to understand why we charge a case, when we don't charge a case, why we go to trial, why we don't go to trial, why we resolve via plea agreement, all of these sorts of different, even evidentiary issues that really, for example, there's certain counties out there who someone gets stopped and they have 10 fentanyl pills, for example. There are counties out there that will charge 1 felony per pill. We don't do that here in Missoula County. And, those are the kind of conversations that I enjoy having with my interns, because it's like, you could do that. Here are the reasons why we don't. Here are the reasons, to consider about, whether this person, needs treatment, or they need to, they're a threat to the community, different things like that. And so you really get a lot of information in a short amount of time, but I think, as any attorney can attest to, you have to be thinking on your feet at all times. And so when you're faced with an ethical dilemma and you have to make a split-second decision, it's really helpful to have practice under a licensed attorney through an internship.
Yeah, for sure. And I also think that it's valuable just to know the other side of the coin, right? Even if you're going to do private practice, knowing how the state side is going to go about things, their frames of thinking, their obligations, is definitely not going to hurt you when thinking about strategy. And so I think that it sounds like it's a fantastic role for experience-wise, because you're just exposed to so many different things at any given time, but also that, regardless of what you choose to do with it, it's still going to be applicable, even if that's not necessarily the road you end up taking.
And I will also say one more thing, sorry.
No, you're good.
We've had several interns where the judges have written us supervising attorneys and say, you should hire these people immediately. So they get face-to-face value in front of a judge, and the judge can see their value. I've also had supervising attorneys from the Office of Public Defender say, if you don't hire this intern, I'm going to hire them. Give me their contact information. And so it is a phenomenal way to say, hey, this is who I am. This is, this is the kind of practice I want to do. And you really get a very, one-on-one face value with the judges and other people in the legal community, and that's invaluable.
Yeah, and I definitely can say from my experience that although, my private attorneys definitely prioritize my education and try to bring me to everything that they can, I can't say that I get that amount of experience whatsoever in my role, at least, as and I primarily do civil, so there's not as many hearings by any means as with criminal, but still, I've probably gotten FaceTime with judges probably 5 times, and I've been, an intern for about 2 years. So if those are the things that you're prioritizing in your legal internship, I definitely think that this might be the route for you, regardless of what you choose to do with it later. Okay, why don't we talk a little bit about what types of internships the county attorney's office offers? Obviously, you said there's only usually 2 at any given time. Obviously, that's pretty prestigious. It's probably a little bit harder to get, but what does that look like? Is that part-time, full-time? Tell us a little bit about the structure.
So when I mention the 2 interns, that's typically through the law school and the placement there. And so my recollection of that is you fill out a form that says, this is my top pick, this is my second pick, this is my third pick. I will say, when I did that program, I want to say the county was my first and the city was my second, and I did not get either of those. And so we typically, like I said, we like to limit it to 2. It doesn't mean we won't take on more. It doesn't mean on some semesters we don't have 1. For in the summer, usually we have 1 intern. And so I can't necessarily speak to the process of, how those interns are chosen. But we've always had clinical interns. And so they come to us, essentially we get an email from the law school saying, these are your interns. We expect them to be there this week, and then we make contact with those interns. They give us their schedules, their names. They have to, do a couple security type things. They have to get, badges to swipe into the courthouse, different things like that. And then we have had opportunities previously where we've had different people who were out on paternity leave or maternity leave, or they're switching and going into a different type of law. So we have vacancies for actual attorneys in our office. So in those instances, we have hired or paid some of our previous interns to stay on as paid interns. So they were interned with us at the law school, or from the law school, for a semester, and then they already know the ropes. We don't have to teach them anything. And so we're like, hey, do you guys have bandwidth to come on as a paid intern? I will say that's more of a rare occasion. I will say I probably get at least 6 emails a year from folks who are in different law schools and coming back here. Maybe they're from Missoula and they're looking to internship with us. I've also had different folks who are not law school folks that are maybe, writing a thesis paper or doing some sort of research, things like that, and they want to come and intern at our office. In the event that we have the space and we're, geared up, for example, we have something called a Calibrate program, which is a pretrial diversion program. So someone's charged with an offense and, they're kind of low risk, low needs. It might be that the prosecutor or defense attorney recommends them for screening. And so we've had interns work in that program and kind of get an idea of what the criminal justice system looks like and what really all of us are trying to accomplish. And so we've had different unique opportunities over the years that have popped up like that. So
yeah, awesome. And so just to clarify, do you take any interns that are prior to law school, or you just do clinical placements for internships?
Typically, we do not take anyone prior to law school. And I would say we're going to evaluate that on a case-by-case basis, but 95% of the time, it's going to be a response email that says, you know, if you find yourself in law school and you still want to pursue this, reach out to us then, or, you know, through the intern process.
Yeah, awesome. Sounds good. And then obviously, because it's a clinical, I just want to make sure that everybody understands that you can't be paid for a clinical in any regard. The clients whom you're working on behalf of, or the victims, in some cases, are not paying anything for the services they're being provided, and you're not being paid for any services that you're rendering. Okay, so when you have an intern, what skills, qualities, etc. are you looking for in order for them to be successful, but also bring value to your office?
So as I mentioned previously, one thing I think that's really important is to have really good writing skills. And I think a lot of times what our attorneys are looking for when they're giving out projects is, you know, we're under a crunch timeline and we need a response brief, we need some legal research, perhaps we need you know, different presentations, things like that. I've had legal interns, you know, I am contacted by probably at least 5 different law enforcement officers on any given day, and sometimes they have, you know, questions for me, or they're looking for guidance on, you know, X, Y, and Z, and I'm like, I don't have time to like draft you up a formal memo or anything like that, so I'll assign those cases to my interns. So I think really good research skills are really important, and really good writing skills are important, because I think if you want whoever is supervising you to be like, this person is phenomenal, that person is going to be someone that I can copy and paste your writing into my brief, and it's game over there.
Yeah,
that's incredible. I also think to be successful, you really have to put yourself out there. You have to communicate, you have to show up on time, you have to have your behind in the office in your chair, you have to say, is there anything I can help you with? Do you have any upcoming hearings? Do you have any upcoming trials? I'm really looking for, you know, this. And I like to sit down with my interns and I say, what sort of crimes are you interested in? Because obviously we prosecute a plethora of crimes. Yep. Some people are interested in white collar crimes, some people are interested in DUI, some people are interested in domestic violence. And so it's a matter of, you know, specifically in our office, we have different units. So seek out those prosecutors, let them know your face, let them know, hey, I'm here. And I think those sorts of things, at least the people who've got the most outstanding clinical reviews from me, are the people who are available, they want to help, they're willing to help. I had an intern 2 years ago who said, I want to try a case with you. And he did, I think I maybe did one direct, maybe, and he did the entire rest of a felony jury trial.
That's awesome.
And it was amazing. And again, he got phenomenal reviews from the judge, phenomenal reviews from the OPD managing attorney, and yeah, the kid knocked it out of the park. It was great. And he just had a lot of charisma, a lot of personality that was really helpful in speaking to a jury. And so I think those are the qualities that we're looking for in interns.
Awesome. Yeah, so you want confidence, you want that charisma, you want people to be obviously self-sufficient insofar as like they're looking for that work, they're not needing to be directed. And those are all a lot of things that we've already talked about in prior episodes and in the prior chapters. And so I just think that those are, again, continuing themes that I just want to make really clear to everybody who's listening. But are there any mistakes that you see legal interns make, maybe consistently or even semi-consistently, that you think people could be aware of prior and maybe do some work to not exhibit those traits or characteristics?
The only, I guess, thing that I would maybe flag for that question would be, if you have questions or concerns, ask whoever's supervising you, because, you know, and I should probably put this into context. I feel like me in my position, I am involved in all these other groups, but I'm also carrying a 100 case felony caseload at any given time, and that's doesn't include the cases I have in the federal system. And so I am triaging multiple things at any given time during the day. And so I wouldn't want to put an intern in a position where an attorney's thinking, now I have to redo this myself, and it's not worth this teaching moment.
Yeah.
Whereas if an intern comes to me and says, hey, you know, I'm doing these jury instructions, for example, where can I find them? What are you looking for? Is there any sort of formatting, different things like that? And a part of that is on your supervisor to say, you know, this is really what I'm looking for. I also know that many individuals learn in different ways. Some people are verbal learners, some people are here as an example. I try and cover all of those bases with my interns. Either I'll ask them up front, you know, what is your learning style? Or, you know, we kind of learn that through. So that's one thing that an intern can do is say, you know, when you're going to meet, say, hey, I like to have examples. So if you want me to do something, if you could just send me an example or two. If I have any questions, I'm going to follow up and ask you, is there a good time to meet? Things like that. Because if you put a project on an attorney's desk that maybe is close to a time deadline and has to be completely redone, that's probably worst case scenario.
Yep. Yeah.
So I would encourage interns to ask questions throughout, and if that attorney's not available to you, you know, maybe find someone else in the office, which is not hard to do in our office. We have, you know, plenty of folks that are usually there.
Yeah, and I, you know, I'd say that I relate to that a lot in my experience too. My attorneys would not be happy with me if I put something on their desk that was not at least up to the standard that they hold me to, and that they know that I'm capable of. And they always say the same thing, which is ask, don't assume. My attorneys have had to tell me that several times. It's not something that comes easy to me because in my mind and possibly in your mind, you don't want to bother them. But the truth is, and like what Brittany's saying, is that it actually ends up being more work for them at the end of the day if you don't bother them as things come up, so that they can show you, and A, you learn so then you can apply it to the future, but B, you learn for that moment in that project too. And then I think it's also really important though that you take on the responsibility to then, you know, retain all of those things and be able to apply them in the future. I mean, Brittany, I don't know how you would feel about that, but I know that my attorneys are not going to want to tell me the same thing over and over again, give me the same criticism, comments, etc., over and over and over again, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that I'm laughing because that reminds me of when I was working with Molly at DML, and I would never qualify myself as a proficient writer, and my grammar was less than stellar when I went into law school, and I remember her having to correct my grammar over and over, and I was like, oh man, Brittany, you need to tape or staple this piece of paper here in your intern cubicle so you don't make this mistake again. I'll also say that it's very important that you have that attention to detail and ask those questions, because as an intern, you're practicing under someone else's license to practice law. And so when I'm filing a document into court, and it has my license on the line, I don't want to have any gray area. I want it to be, you know, as if I wrote it myself. Yeah. And so I think that's very important to know the weight and gravity of the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. And I totally relate to that too. Like, I mean, I'm not in law school yet. I can't practice under my own name. I am essentially, anything that I do is absolutely from an attorney, right? And so anything that I give them, like, I remember all the time that like my actions can have a consequence, not only on the attorney, but also on the client that we're working on behalf of. I mean, if I mess up a really important pleading, I miss a deadline or something, I mean, does it affect the attorney? Yeah. Is it going to affect my standing as an intern? Absolutely. But who's it going to affect the most is the client, and it can have lasting effects on their cases. It could possibly even be detrimental. So always remembering at the end of the day that you're working on behalf of people, and that you're doing important work, and that you're also working under people, all of which you're affecting at any given time, is really important. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, because that's not something I would have thought of to communicate. What type of mentorship is available at the county attorney's office and different networking opportunities? I know you spoke to how important it is, but if someone comes and is interning with you, what type of opportunities can they see for mentorship and for future networking?
Shoot, I feel like the world is your oyster at the Missoula County Attorney's Office. You have the opportunity to work with, and I might be off on my numbers, 18 criminal attorneys, 4 or 5 DN attorneys. We usually have 4 civil attorneys on the civil side of our office. you could work on basically anything you would want to work on. I think what's the most valuable about our type of work is the fast-paced nature of it. Again, as I said, if I was graduating from law school, I would want to be able to say I've done 30 bench trials and I've done 2 jury trials. That's more than some people who've been practicing law for 15 years can say.
Absolutely.
And that is invaluable. The judges are going to know the type of attorney you are. They are going to really get a good sense of your courtroom presence, your demeanor, things like that are so important. And also, if you're coming from a civil side or defense side, your word travels fast. People are going to see you in court. They're going to say, hey, I liked that attorney's style, or that attorney seemed kind and compassionate, or, they have this experience, maybe I want to hire that attorney. And so I would say specifically in our office, you have the opportunity to sharpen your writing skills. You have the opportunity to sharpen your verbal communication skills, your confidence in the courtroom, your ability to connect with victims, with witnesses, with jurors, with, all different sorts of people. And I will also say that I've interacted with enough people from the civil bar to know that the criminal bar is much different. The civil bar, there's a lot more email exchanges that are not kind to be on the receiving end of, and the criminal bar is just small enough that, I know if I'm going to burn this bridge, I have 3 more cases with this person coming up in the next couple of weeks. And so it's a lot more cordial. It's a lot more understanding. There's far less things like objections to continuances and different things like that, or trying to be helpful in multiple different realms, because we all have an extremely high caseload and are just working like crazy. And so that's something too that's, I think, valuable to an intern to see, is like your personal and professional development. What kind of attorney do you want to be? Do you want to be someone that when, someone sees a notice of appearance on your case, they're like, oh man, I don't want to have another case with this person? Or do you want to be someone that's like, hey, I can't help you with this, but let me refer you to this other attorney that I think is really good and very ethical and professional?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. That leads me to my last question, which is, what advice would you give future legal professionals looking for an internship generally, but also maybe even one with your office?
So again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but making those connections with people. I think I said, when we spoke earlier, I've had multiple people who are even just looking to become a paralegal in hopes of going to law school. And I have multiple connections in different areas of my life in the community, and they will be like, hey, I'm going to have you come sit down with Brittany Williams, or Brittany, will you sit down with this person? Okay. And I find it so incredibly valuable to do that, to develop the legal profession in Missoula, that it might take me a couple weeks, but I absolutely want to schedule at least an hour to sit down and talk to these young people who are looking to come into the profession. And so I can't stress enough the value of making those connections. And I think, as you're just talking with people, whether it's in a social setting or a professional setting, I like to bring people into my office. They can see what it's like. They can hear everyone running around and get an idea of if that's something that they're interested in. And I think I think it's a good idea to go watch some court proceedings, especially now with Zoom. You could have it on Zoom in the background. You can see what that looks like. You can watch different trials. Any court, other than some specific hearings, is open to the public. Go in there and get an idea. And if you want to, catch an attorney that you admire after a hearing and say, hey, my name is so-and-so, would it be possible to sit down and meet with you? Or, do you have a card? I'd like to, see if we can set up a meeting at some point in time. Those really like hands-on things are valuable, I think. I mean, when I get someone connecting with me, say for example, via email that's from, some out-of-state person, we at the county obviously have to have pretty thick spam. And so you always run that risk that they're not going to respond.
Right.
And so that real human connection, I can't stress that enough. And I would say, I came from a non-legal background, but I was able to use the skills that I had from my medical experience. I worked as a CNA. I worked in an orthopedic surgeon's office. I, had an educational background that was focused on medical stuff. So don't count yourself out. If you're interested in a legal field, any experience you have is valuable. My experience would have been, it was valuable to plaintiff's work. It was valuable to workman's comp. Any sort of thing like that is, don't discredit any of your experience. Just think kind of outside the box and just pursue different avenues and talk to different professionals.
Awesome. I think that that's a fantastic place to end. Well, thank you so much, Brittany, for being here, and I appreciate your contributions to the legal community. And just to reiterate, folks, like, Brittany is a fantastic resource for you to reach out to, especially if you're looking to practice in Missoula or just get any sort of hands-on experience. She can definitely be a great resource to point you in the right direction of anywhere that you should go based on your interest or anything else. She's incredibly knowledgeable and has done fantastic work, not only on behalf of interns, but on behalf of Missoula County and Mineral Counties and any that she has touched. And so I so appreciate you being here. And that concludes our podcast. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and if you haven't yet, go check out my website where all of the other podcast episodes are, and my ebook, www.406legalinternships.com. I'll see you next time.